Hello and welcome to Protect Your Copyrights with your host, Robert King. On today's episode, Robert will explore the importance of protecting your life story or the life story of your loved one. And now, here's Robert.
Hey everyone, Robert King with Red Giant Rights Group, Protect Your Copyrights. Thanks for tuning in. Today we are talking about a very interesting, fascinating topic, life story, and how your life story is being represented in programs, future programs, whether they're documentaries or satellite video on demand, like a Netflix or a Hulu or Paramount or some kind of program like that, or on Showtime, HBO, cable, or major motion picture. And is it your story? Is it your family story? Is it an artist that was in your life that died, that passed away, and now you are responsible to protect their legacy? So there are so many different elements, so many different approaches to how do we protect our life story. And this is a very popular topic right now. If you think about over the last many years in the major motion picture, you think about movies like What's Love Got to Do with It, the Tina Turner story. Ray was a very popular movie, the Ray Charles story. And then you ask yourself, well, of course, all the different Elvis movies and stories, whether it's for television or for the major motion pictures. You ask yourself, why do they make these movies of these recording artists, or we'll call them biopics? Why do they choose recording artists for biopics? They're fascinating people. They are brilliant, talented, and they have created, many of them, usually, they've created a canon or a catalog of songs that have potentially impacted or changed lives out there to the audiences. So for a production company, the brand already exists, right? Different from making a rom-com or some kind of drama just based on an idea. This one has a built-in audience. There's a brand new Whitney Houston movie coming out in a couple of weeks in the theaters, and then it will go on to satellite video on demand. And there's a Whitney Houston audience that already exists. That's why they're releasing it as a major motion picture, and that they set aside the budget that they do. So your artist, or you already have an established brand. The production companies are interested in your story because the brand already exists, because you've already had success. You already have an audience. You already sell out tickets to your concerts, or you did at one time, or your family member did at one time. So there's already a story to tell. Now, usually, the old rock and roll stories, the backstage stories and the life. You think about Tina Turner and the story between her and her husband. There's drama associated with their stories. Often, some of these artists come from humble beginnings, and they are finding their way in the world. Many of them sang in either small clubs or churches or in their communities, and found their way into small opportunities. And then those small opportunities grew and became bigger, and they ran into different people in the business, and they got a break, and then they got a hit, and then they got several hits, and then how did they deal with their celebrity? And how did that have an effect on them? And there are obviously many stories that we know from musicians or actors or authors or, the creatives, where they would find themselves involved in some of the vices of the world, which can include many different things. As you know, there's a lot of drinking, or stories of drinking or drugs being taken backstage or leading up to concerts, or the the other sexes happening backstage, or all of the different groupies. I mean, there's just story after story after story, and it's fascinating. There is a world out there where these celebrities live a life that is so far outside of the normal life that there's something fascinating about it. And then there is a story of triumph, because, or not, we have lost some people. Some people have succumbed to their addictions, or their inabilities to navigate all of those negative impacts in their career. But there often are stories of triumph, where they did go through difficult times. They did deal with rejection, and they dealt with artists. Executives, music executives taking advantage of them, or they dealt with something, some kind of abuse. But they were able to overcome. They were able to survive. So there are stories of redemption when it comes to these biopics, and there are stories of triumph. And I haven't seen the Whitney Houston movie, but I would imagine that is a perfect example of a story of tragedy, where you have this amazing, incredibly talented singer, icon, that has signature moments in our lives. I can remember watching her sing the Star Spangled Banner at the Super Bowl like it was yesterday, and thinking while you're watching it, this is the best version I've ever heard of this song ever. And so they have these singular moments. And then that life snuffed out way too early in a tragic way. So the stories themselves are fascinating. The people are fascinating. And the production companies are, just think about it this way. There are more production companies. You may have even heard me say this before. There are more production companies now than there have ever been. There are more opportunities for your story to be told on some platform than there have ever been. Or your artist's story, if you're a surviving family member. These production companies are looking for biopics of recording artists or songwriters or the like. And let me tell you why. Because recently, some of the ones that have been released, like Straight Outta Compton or Bohemian Rhapsody or Rocket Man, some of these have been very successful and have not only made back their budget, but have made profit. So they can be very profitable. So the production companies are looking for these stories. They are in desperate need of this content. They're looking now more than ever for content, and you have more outlets for content than any other time in our history. So now's a great time to be in the life story business. So we have this opportunity. And the other thing that I think is important to say is actors love these stories. Actors love the opportunity to transform themselves into these characters these icons, these characters that we know, or that we think we know, that we've seen over and over and over again. And often the actors are awarded. They win awards. They are recognized. They are heralded, I guess, as a kind of an old word. Sounds like a Shakespearean word. They are recognized for these performances because you get to see them mimic and act as if they are the person in these live performances, or they're taped. But I mean, if you've seen the Elvis movie, this Austin Butler, very young actor, in so many different ways was able to capture Elvis in a really unique and exciting way. And what an opportunity for him as an actor to portray that character. The same thing with Bohemian Rhapsody. Same thing with Rocket Man, Aretha Franklin, that came out recently. So and Ray Charles. If my memory serves me correctly, I believe that he won Best Actor for that performance. So in the Academy Awards. So these actors respond also to the opportunity to portray. They are critically acclaimed for these for having the opportunity they're critically acclaimed for their performances, the recreations of these individuals, and more often than not, sometimes. More often than not, the individual has passed. So we are reflecting back on the icon. Aretha, Whitney Houston. Now, Elton John is still alive, which is kind of cool that Elton John was still alive when they did his biopic. That's a fun premiere to go to when you're going to a premiere of your own biopic. So the point is, these biopics are, they're valuable right now. Okay? These are great stories. And the other cool thing is that these stories are filled with music and story, which is always a very interesting dynamic and popular dynamic right now in the medium. So you have the production companies who are looking for the stories. You have a story, but how do you protect your story? And that's where we want to focus today. How do you protect your story? There is a when you're talking about protecting your story, we're often talking about the people who are the surviving family members, and how do they protect the legacy of their artists. We're going to have an interview here in a second, because this has come up here recently in many different circumstances, and it's come up recently but specifically in the George and Tammy. It's come up recently in the George and Tammy Showtime special. And this is a George Jones, Tammy Wynette Showtime series, 6-episode series. And the characters have all passed, right? George Jones, Tammy Wynette, and the other main character is George Richey, who became Tammy Wynette's husband after George Jones. And so all three of those main characters have passed. And so it's the legacy of those three characters, or the story being told of those three characters. This particularly is fascinating because of the way they are being portrayed and the story that is being told. And we're going to have an interview in a few minutes with with George Richey's widow, Sheila Richey, Sheila Slaughter Richey. And to hear to kind of her take on how so far her husband is being represented, and to give you some insight on the importance of protecting your life story. So how do you go about doing this? The first thing that I would say is you have to be vigilant. So how do you go about doing this? The first thing that I would say is that you have to be vigilant. You have to be vigilant about knowing, okay, the opportunity is there, so you are going to actively pursue the opportunity for somebody to tell the story of either you or your surviving family member. But you have to be vigilant in the protection of what is actually going to be said. I have a client who was approached by a production studio to do his life story, and they were in the process. They were shooting the story. They were in the process of filming, and he backed out. He pulled out of this wonderful opportunity for his life to be represented in major motion picture or satellite video on demand, Netflix, Apple, Hulu. And he pulled out. He got out of the story. He got out of the contract. Why? Because they were telling it in a way that did not represent the truth. And he wanted to be vigilant about protecting his life story. So you are going into a fictional enterprise, right? Based on a true story. But you got to realize that Hollywood, the concept of Hollywood, is fiction. Otherwise, it's a documentary. And even documentaries can be slanted. Most documentaries are biased by the documentarian. So you have to realize you're going into a fictional world. And so that's why you have to be vigilant about how that story is going to be told and how you're going to protect your story. We can talk about this if you ever get the opportunity, if somebody ever approaches. We can talk about how the language in the contract will be able to protect your input into the final product. So we can absolutely have that conversation, but I will tell you that if you let go of it a little bit, they're going to tell a story that you may not be true. Not true. It may not reflect the truth as you wanted it told. The second part of the opportunity, or how to protect your life story, is to be really clear on what your rights are. So, and this comes up because Olivia de Havilland, you've heard me say this many times before, but just to reiterate, I'm not an attorney. I run a company. We help artists protect their copyrights. And we help singers, bands, songwriters, authors, actors, every single one of them either wanting to protect their copyrights or exploit their assets in some way. In many cases, most of our artists are older, so we are reinvigorating their brands with attention and exploiting their assets in many times for profit. So that's what we do at Red Giant. So I'm not an attorney. So you should always, and we have plenty of the best, we work with some of the best attorneys in the country, so we have access to that if you need that. But I would never tell you not to consult an attorney. But so the story that I'm going to tell, you should definitely ask an attorney about the very specifics of it, because I'm not an attorney. But I will say this, that the Olivia de Havilland story is very interesting, that happened over the last couple of years. Because a movie came out, and Olivia de Havilland was represented in the movie. She as an actress. I think the movie was about Betty Davis, if I remember correctly. It was the Betty Davis story. But Olivia de Havilland was the actual person was represented in the movie. And Olivia de Havilland, who was still alive at the time, didn't like the way that she was represented. And nobody contacted her to ask her if, this is the way you're going to be represented in this movie. Are you cool with this? Nobody ran it by her first before they filmed it, captured it, edited it, and distributed it. And so Olivia de Havilland sued the production company and said, hey, you didn't consult with me. You didn't ask my permission. You didn't do any of this stuff. And I wasn't paid for my name or my likeness to be represented. And I didn't like the way I was represented. I didn't appreciate the way I was represented. So I am suing you. And she lost. And she lost because, A, she's a celebrity, and you have every right to, in this free country of ours, under the First Amendment, to say anything about anybody, unless it's in a slanderous way, which it wasn't. She was just represented in the movie, and she's a celebrity, and she's allowed to do it. Again, I'm not an attorney, so the specifics of this, don't sue me because I said because I didn't say it the right way. An attorney will tell you, but she lost because she's a person of celebrity, and the other piece is that they can have her say or make her say or present her in any way that they want, because it's a free country. And they don't have to have her permission to do such a thing, because because she's a celebrity and it's a free country. So it's very interesting when you have that decision recently, like in the last couple of years, you have that decision recently for an artist or a family member to say, wait a second, I don't want to be in that movie. I don't want my name in the movie. I don't want to be associated with the movie. I'm going to sue you because you didn't ask my permission. You're going to lose. So you have no rights when it comes to that. Now, the best thing that I can tell, none of the production companies are on my podcast listening to anything that I have to say, believe me. But I would tell you, and I would tell any production company, the best way to do it is to call Olivia de Havilland and say, hey, just want to give you a heads up, you're in this movie, and this is your character, and this is what you're going to say, and whatever. And even better, ask Olivia de Havilland about the circumstances. What was it like? What was it? We're trying to recreate as much of the environment as possible, or to give us some insight to make our movie better. But they didn't do that. They don't have to do that. But in order to protect your rights, you have to understand what you're getting yourself into, which is a fictional enterprise. And the rights that you have can be negotiated in the contract so that you can protect that story as much as possible. If somebody uses your name or likeness without your permission, not much you can do, frankly, unless it's slanderous in some way. And then you can fight. And I think that you saw what went on with the CNN suit recently to the kid that was at the rally or something. He was wearing a hat, and and somebody came over and started drumming in his face or whatever, and there was all kinds of things that were said about this young man. I think he was in high school. This young man that different, and I think it was CNN who got sued, and they may have settled out of court. Again, I'm not an attorney. They may have settled out of court, or they went to court and CNN lost. So you can go over the line in what you say about a person, but the representation of a person in a biopic or in a media presentation that's a fictional movie, they have a lot of leeway, and you don't have a lot of rights. So, in order to protect your rights, my final piece of advice before we bring Sheila in and talk a little bit about protecting her husband's legacy is be involved in the process as much as you can. And that is a part of the negotiation of when they approach you, if they approach you. But when they approach you, or if you are actively pursuing a relationship with a production company, it's always better if the production is always better, more authentic, more valuable to the audience when the families are involved and when they can provide insight that nobody would ever know, stories that nobody would ever know. And so you want to be involved, heavily involved, and you want to do what you can to navigate how that story is being told. And all of that is part of the negotiation process. And frankly, what I love about it is they can come to you, you can say, this is what we want. They can say, no way, go jump in a lake and go make a movie on their own. And that's fine. And you know what? Their movie's going to suffer because they didn't have your direct impact. Talking about you specifically as an artist or talking about your family member. And then gives you the opportunity to go make the real movie, the right movie, whether it's a documentary or any kind of, in this medium. That gives you the opportunity to say, this is what the real story is. This is, and it's fascinating what's going on right now with the George Jones, Tammy Wynette Showtime special, because I don't know much about this. I don't have a lot of insight, but I can tell you from just what I've heard, people who knew George Jones, people who knew Tammy Wynette, the way they are being represented in specifically George Jones, the way that they're being represented in this movie is very different from what reality was. So it is a pure piece of fiction, dramatic, without question, dramatic and very interesting, fun to watch, particularly if you like music, but fun to watch. But is it real? And that's where that's where Hollywood may not do the artists a great service, is because when you see it, you think, oh, well, this has to be real. They wouldn't have made it. They wouldn't have gone through the trouble of making a movie if it wasn't right or if it wasn't real. But that's pretty far from the truth, from reality. So let us see if we can't get Sheila Richey on the phone so that we can talk about her husband, George Richey, and because George Richey is one of the major characters in this George and Tammy Showtime special series, and how even in the first episode, how her husband is being represented, and is it right on? Is it dead on? Or is it really far from the truth or reality? And I think it'll be kind of fun. So on the phone we have Sheila Slaughter Richey, who is George Richey's widow, and one of the characters that we've been talking about in the George and Tammy series, George Jones, Tammy Wynette, and George Richey. So Sheila, are you there?
Hey, yes, I'm here. Good afternoon. How are you, Robert?
I'm good. Thanks, Sheila. Thanks for joining the Protect Your Copyrights podcast. In leading up to talking to you, we just been talking about with the audience the concept of protecting your copyrights, protecting your life story. And sometimes, more often than not, it's the surviving family member who is in that position to protect the life story. And I find it fascinating in this particular series, the George and Tammy series on Showtime, there are three primary characters as we see so far: George Jones, Tammy Wynette, and then George Richey. And I'm interested in kind of what your feedback is or what your take is on seeing your husband represented on film, on television, seeing your husband represented in this movie. What was that experience like, seeing this actor playing your husband?
Well, thanks for the question, and thanks for reaching out to me. You're actually the first person that did contact me as it regards my late husband, George Richey. He was completely misrepresented. It didn't look a thing like him. My late husband he was very cool. He had so much swag. He was tall. He was quite a bit taller than George Jones, and in the show, Steve Zahn makes him, he's very short and very goofy, and Richie wasn't goofy at all. He was quite serious. He's a very kind-hearted person, but I wouldn't have classified him as goofy. He was, when George Richey walked into the room, he had such a presence about him, such a command, in that he just was so sexy and interesting. Well,
and they've made him out to be, I'm sorry to cut you off, but it seems like they made him out to be somewhat forgettable. But the way George Jones, doesn't even know who he is in the room.
Well, that's just not true. Richie had already had so much success in Nashville, and George Jones very much knew who George Richey was, and they were, not only friends, but, they worked together. Richie wrote many songs for him. So, and they made him look like a germ, which he was not at all. Richie.
That wig.
Oh, it was horrific. My daughter, Richie and I have a daughter, she's 21 years old, and she was mortified. She's like, what in the world? That was not my dad. Who is this person?
Oh, my gosh. Well, that must be very, and not to take us off course, but that must be very interesting for a child. She's 21, so she has a recollection of who her father was, and to see her father represented on screen, I imagine that was very surreal.
Yeah, and she was, in the beginning, to be honest, she was upset when she found out about it, because so many misconceptions have been out there, so many truths and just things are inaccurate have been said about him. So she was concerned that they were going to say those same lies over again. She never imagined that she would have to be worried that he was going to be a goofball, because he was anything but a goofball. He was like, "What? My dad was so cool." I mean, and let's be real. Tammy Wynette would not have been married to a goofball for 20 years. Okay?
Right.
There was a reason Tammy was in love with him. It's because he was very sexy and very cool, and he was such a gentleman.
That's
interesting.
interesting.
He was very, very, very poorly portrayed. And you know what? Steve Zahn didn't even bother to call and reach out to the family. We didn't know anything about it.
I was going to ask you that. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I mean, obviously, you are a surviving family member, and I think we've talked about in the past, you knew Tammy Wynette.
Yes.
You knew George Jones, I think. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely, yes.
So you're a person who knew all three people fairly well.
Very much so.
And as far as I understand, the production company did not reach out to you.
Yes, which people find it hard to believe that you can do a life story about someone without being contacted. The truth is, I'm George Richey's next of kin. I was not contacted. His estate was not contacted. Tammy Wynette's estate was not contacted. George Jones' widow, Nancy Jones, who was married to George Jones for 32 years, together for 34 years, she was not contacted. She had nothing, had nothing to do with it. So everything that you're seeing on the screen, this is the story. This is the Georgette Jones story, not the George and Tammy true story. It's from the fantasies of Georgette Jones. It's not.
Who's the author of the book that the series is based on? Got it.
That is correct.
And so when we talk about protecting your life story, and it's hard. Before you got on, we were talking a little bit about Olivia de Havilland and the case that she had, the suit that she brought against the production company, because she was misrepresented and wasn't contacted before, and she lost. So in the real world, they don't have to reach out to you. But I think the point that I made right before you came on was it would make the special or the movie so much better and more authentic if they had reached out to you. And I'm surprised that an actor or really a series of actors of their caliber didn't reach out to learn more about these characters in a very personal way.
Well, yes, and it's a slam to Tammy, it's a slam to Richie, it's a slam to the whole legacy of all of us, in that it would have been so easy to cast Richie correctly.
Right.
I mean, he had a certain walk, he had a certain way, he had a certain, he was just cool.
Yeah.
And they didn't try at all. I mean, zero. They didn't try at all to capture the real George Richey.
It's interesting.
They just threw out this goofball from, I know that Georgette Jones totally slandered him. Her book is completely filled with lies about him. So they didn't go beyond what they read in an unauthorized book. Well, it's her author. I mean, it's her book. It's her story. But there's tons and tons based on manufactured untruths about my late husband and myself. I'm in her book too, and she totally lied about me. So I know if she's lying about me, I can promise you she's lying about him, and that's a whole another story. But
right.
That they can do that. They absolutely in America. I could go make a movie about you. I wouldn't have to contact you.
Right. It wouldn't be very good.
No, but I'm just saying you can do that. It's not very ethical. It's not very kind, and it makes you wonder, like, who are these people? I mean, why?
Well, I just think I think the movie would be better as well.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
And we always want a better product, I would imagine. Well, it's very interesting, and I think that
in poor taste. It was just done in poor taste for them not to contact us. I'm not saying the movie. I mean, the series is all in poor taste. I think much of it. It's the quality is there, the acting is there, the production value is there. They have beautiful scenery. So much of it is great, and I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled that they're trying to carry on and introduce George Jones and Tammy Wynette to the next generations. I am all for that. I just think it needs to be done correctly. And in this case, it wasn't all done correctly, but it wasn't all bad either.
And for our audience, when we talk about protecting your, whether it's your legacy or your family's legacy, I think it's really important, and we appreciate you jumping on the phone. I think it's really important that you take the opportunity to set the record straight and say, hey, this is nowhere close to who this person really was. And I know that I think if I remember correctly, I know that protecting George Richey's legacy has become almost a life's mission for you, and it has affected you in a real personal way.
Very much so.
If I remember.
Very much so. Yes, and it's also been my mission. I am to protect Tammy Wynette. I have taken on that role. I mean, it was dropped in my lap because of who I was married to, and I took it very seriously. I worked with the Country Music Hall of Fame. I am the one with Richie that worked so diligently to get all of that stuff properly placed in the hands of where it would be most respected. And it's there, all of her awards and everything, they're all there now because of me and my late husband, because we did the work. Tammy's kids tried very, very hard to sell those things. Anytime they would get something, they'd put it on eBay or sell it to some, fan or something. And we were very adamant that you've got to keep all that collection together. And then I was very instrumental in having her personal property with the Grand Ole Opry. So I have been very much involved in protecting Tammy's legacy. It's always behind the scenes, and I'm not trying to get credit for all of it, but I'm very passionate about it. I heard Jessica Chastain recently talk about how she's very defensive and protective of Tammy. I'm like, yeah, hello, I'm the original, I'm the OG at that. I've been doing that this whole time. So I understand her feeling very, very protective over Tammy, because Tammy was a wonderful woman. She's a legend, and she was my friend, and I had a duty to do all I can to make sure that she was protected.
I think Jessica, if I can possibly even speak out of turn, I think Jessica may have really benefited from having a conversation with you in her preparation for this entire series as an executive producer, but as an actor portraying the character. I think there would have been... she missed an opportunity, in my humble opinion.
Yes, she did. Now, she did reach out to me once through Instagram, and she was going to... But this was after the show had already happened. I mean, she was almost finished filming. I didn't even know what was going on.
Gotcha.
Okay, so that's when all things started going. I'm like, wait a minute. Then I found out through Nancy Jones that there was a character playing me and Richie, and I'm like, oh, whoa, wait a minute. I didn't know about any of this. I hadn't been contacted about anything. So that's when lawyers started getting involved.
So just for clarification, there is a Sheila Richey in the series.
That is correct. But it's not me. It's not Sheila Richey. The Sheila Richey that they are showing in there, that is not her correct name. Her married name was Sheila Richardson. She was my late husband's second wife.
Okay.
She was married as Sheila Richardson. They got a divorce. Her divorce paper said Sheila Richardson. Her death certificate all say Sheila Richardson. She was not known to her community or her family as Sheila Richey.
Got it.
So that's confusing. I've had so many phone calls and people going, what? And just so that your audience is clear, because we haven't made this clear, my late husband was born George Richardson. So he didn't change his name until he got into the music business. I mean, Richardson, I guess he didn't think was very cool. So he changed it to George Richey.
Okay.
So he was known by both names, George Richardson and George Richey.
Okay.
And his other the other Sheila, she went by Sheila Richardson. So it's a bit confusing to people, at least in my circles, that they're like, oh, well, at least you had a cute headband on in the show. I'm like, oh, honey, that's not me. And they're like, what? It's confusing because they didn't set it up.
So you are Sheila Slaughter Richey.
That is correct.
And she is Sheila
Hall Richardson.
Sheila Hall Richardson. I got you. But she is the character that is married to. I think she was in episode 2 this last week. She is with.
I think she's been in both.
She's with George Richey. It seems like in the bar. I think they were together or something.
Yes, it's not me.
It's not you. Okay. Well, no. This is a. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was just going to say, this is a fascinating story, and for the audience, these are the details that are so important, and why my recommendation always is if be involved as much as you can be, particularly contractually, with the production company when they are making your life story. And then if you aren't, if they didn't include you, then like Sheila is doing now, I think you have to get out there and set the record straight and protect your family, protect the legacy of your artist that is so important to your family.
Yes, it is very important. And I will give you just a little tidbit. George Jones and I became friendly, back after Tatum was born. So maybe like in 2002, 2003, we became friendly with, we would go and have lunch and dinner with George and Nancy Jones, and Tatum and George Richey and I would all go up to the house. And I can remember the first time he met me, he goes, wow, I really like you a lot. You are nothing like these girls have told me you are. I'm like, well, thanks, I think. Anyway, but I became a confidant of his, and he would call me on the phone. And this poor man, and was terrified to die because he saw what happened to George Richey after Tammy Wynette died, and he didn't want those same things happen to him. So he's like, I need your help. Can you guide me through some things? Because I don't want Nancy to have any problems when I die, and I don't want my legacy hurt when I die, because I can only imagine what they're going to do to me. And that's when it all really kind of started for me, when I started advising people, celebrities and high net worth individuals, how they can prepare their own estates and their stories. Because if you don't prepare it before you die, once you're gone, all bets are off. They can take and do to you whatever they want, because you can't come back from heaven. Hopefully that's where you're at.
Right.
But you can't come back from that. So you've got to get it set up in advance. And I have a system in place to help people do that.
Wow.
Because it's so important.
Wow.
That every person, it's not just for the George Jones and Tammy Wynette's of the world. It's for your next door neighbors, for your grandmother. I mean, this happens to families everywhere, not just the most famous singers in the world.
Right.
So it's something to consider for your own family, for yourself.
Interesting. Well, that's definitely, I'm very interested in that, and we'll definitely have to talk about that more in the future. We'll have you back on to talk about for anybody to protect their rights, to protect their legacy. But I really want to thank
their own stories.
I really want to thank you, Sheila Slaughter Richey, for your time today. It's so insightful, so interesting. These behind the scenes stories are fascinating, and so we appreciate your candor and telling us and really sharing with us your journey and the importance of protecting your life story.
Well, I appreciate the invitation, Robert, and anytime, and let's continue the conversation. I think it's an important one, And I look forward to seeing what else is going to come up on George and Tammy.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you, Sheila. Wow, that was awesome. What an interview. That was fantastic. Thank you, Sheila Slaughter Richey, for joining us on Protect Your Copyrights podcast. It just reiterates how important it is to protect your rights, protect the rights of your loved ones. And in our business, we're talking about recording artists, songwriters, authors, actors, and the like. And I think Sheila makes a very good point. You got to protect your story no matter who you are, because when you're gone, they can make up whatever story they want to about you. But I'm really appreciative of Sheila and her time today, and I hope that you were able to take something away from this that will encourage you and challenge you to be on the lookout for your life story or your family member's life story and how you can protect that life story. Feel free to reach out to us anytime if you do have any questions. But for now, this is Robert King. I run a company called Red Giant Rights Group, and this is Protect Your Copyrights. Till next time.
Thanks for listening to Protect Your Copyrights. For a confidential conversation, feel free to reach out to Robert King directly on his cell phone at 1-917-848-9934. Once again, that's 1-917-848-9934. Thanks!